Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. In this episode, I am joined by Jack Green. Jack is a double Olympian, keynote speaker, world champion coach and mental health advocate. As a British sprint athlete, he specialised in 400 metres, along with hurdles and 4x400 metre relays. He competed for Team GB at the 2012 Olympics in London and also the 2016 Olympics in Rio. And he's also won medals at World and European Athletic Championships. Since his retirement from athletics, Jack has become a high-profile ambassador in mental health in a variety of roles, including head of wellbeing at the BBC Studios. So welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today. I should probably say you probably scrape into the midlife category, maybe only just, but you're very welcome anyway. Perhaps you could start by telling us, where things started. How did you? How was your early life, and how did you start to get into athletics?
I think, like a lot of people, it's the standard way of you try something at school and you realise you're good at it, and then you get encouraged to go down that path. So until I was 7, no real interest in sport, but I wanted to be a vet or an archaeologist or a zookeeper. My fascination with animals, studied dinosaurs and so on and so forth. But it was 7 years old, ran down a grass track. My primary school beat everyone by a country mile to qualify for our district sports. And I quite like being told I was good at something. I quite like winning things. And it kind of went from there. I don't know if it was ever a love of running. It was more a love of praise and recognition more than anything.
And I don't think obviously you can't tell from listening to you, but you're quite tall, aren't you? So I imagine you lend yourself quite well to track events.
Yeah, being 6'4", I very quickly became a high jumper. Obviously I wasn't 6'4" at 7. That would have been mightily impressive. And God knows how large I'd be now. But yeah, it's definitely still doing high jump now if I was even bigger. But yeah, I was a good athlete, but I wasn't anything great. Though from the age of 7, I was making conscious decisions about how do I become an Olympic champion or Olympic athlete at least. Like my whole focus from that day onwards, where I ran down that grass track, was how do I live out my dream of being an Olympian, which can be quite strange for some people to hear that a 7-year-old was that focus from that point, but I was. But I was like county standard, I'd like be state standard, right? Winning medals in your local area, but nothing that was going to say you're going to be a top athlete. But then at the age of 14, I did the 400 meters for the first time and showed some promise. And then being tall, someone said to me, why don't you give the hurdles a go? And 400 meter hurdles at 15 led me to, never look back really. My first race, I broke the British record for my age and thought, right, this is the one that's going to get me what I want. So off you go.
And then that journey, well, the next, I guess you ended up in the Team GB for the London 2012 Olympics, which must have been, amazing in terms of your career. And did you feel at that point that, you'd made it, that was, really had your dreams come true at that point?
So from the 15-year-old that tried 400 hurdles for the first time, within 4 years, I had gone to a world championship for a senior athlete, so against all the people I used to watch on TV and dream about being, essentially, let alone competing with them and beating them. So very quickly, I went from a kid to a professional athlete. At 7, I was writing those stories. At 18, I went pro. And I always believed I was going to be the best, but it did happen very quickly. I went from 106th in the world at 18 years old to 16th within one season. And then going into London 2012, I was ranked 6th in the world. And I thought I was destined just to be better than everyone else. And I didn't think I'd made it as such, because my whole dream was I'm going to be the best that's ever lived. So I actually spent most of my life feeling like a failure because I wasn't the person that I said I was going to be, even though I was achieving great things. Those Olympic Games, they were incredible, especially for a British person, and then to compete at them. And I remember skiving off school to find out if London was hosting the games when I was like 13 or whatever that was. And then I'm there. And, 2 years before, I was down in East Kent in south of England where not much happens, single parent family, training twice a week. And now I'm suddenly one of the best athletes in the world. But I have very few memories from the Olympics because I was so full of fear. And the reason I was so full of fear was because this was my moment to confirm who I thought I was, who I said I was going to be. And it wasn't a case of thinking, right, well, this is your first Olympics. You could go to another 2, 3 Olympics and gradually be ready for the opportunity. I saw this as, this is your measure of you. This is your value, your self-worth is all going to be in this moment. And because of that, I was so full of fear that I might not fulfill my idea of who I was, that, I've got very few memories, to be honest, because it was just a big haze, which is so sad when I was living out my dream already at 20 years old and in front of a home crowd, which how many athletes get to compete at a home Olympics? Not many.
I mean, I can't imagine the mental state you need to be in order to be focused and compete in, something like the Olympics. But how was that contrasting, your focus and desire to do the best, but then also starting to, have, as you described, perhaps some mental health challenges? How did you manage the two, and how did they kind of manifest?
I didn't manage the two. I was an all or nothing individual. I would have done anything to I would have destroyed myself to be the best. I would have destroyed people around me at that point quite happily, because my whole worth and life was how fast I ran on the track. And if that anything stopped me from running fast, I was going to blow it out of the way, right? So I didn't believe mental health existed as a young person. I think you're looking back, that's 2012. So I didn't believe mental health existed. I come from a very standard kind of British family of stiff upper lip and get on with it, very macho in that respect. And I thought mental health, or poor mental health rather, was an excuse. I thought that was for people who weren't capable of doing great things, or they were soft, or whatever that might be. And I wasn't one of those people. I was one of the high performers, the person destined to be successful. So I can't be someone that struggles with mental health. And I actually fell in those Olympics where I was so full of fear and lacked clarity. I got to the third hurdle in the semi-final and I fell. So it was a really big failure in my mind, rather than actually seeing that as a growing opportunity of, well, how do I overcome that anxiety, my mindset, my perspective, so that I can just go out there and do what I do best, which is just run. But it was shortly after those Olympics that I was diagnosed with depression, bipolar tendencies, generalized anxiety disorder, and I was actually considered a threat to my own life at that point, which is incredibly sad for someone who was 20 years old. I was ranked top 10 in the world. I actually finished 4th in those Olympics in the relay, and I was voted the most talented sports person of a generation in Britain, out of any sport. And yet, actually, at that point, I ended up spending 6 weeks in the Priory in Birmingham, because I was considered a threat to myself. And actually, in hindsight, I struggled for a long time because I didn't believe in mental health. So I had to kind of get to crisis to then be open enough to have thought, well, I've looked at every other possible issue that might have been there. I tried changing my nutrition where I trained, moved into a house I couldn't afford because I'd never had a nice house, those kind of things. Like, oh, well, that'll complete it and I'll be back to normal. And yeah, it wasn't until I got to that crisis point of not wanting to live, essentially, that, I went and got help.
And did you seek the help yourself, or did you share your challenges with somebody else, and that led to then finding some sort of support?
Well, it's a mixture, really, because I tried to compete that following season. Training had been awful. I wasn't able to finish training. I just wasn't me, right? Because running around a track and putting yourself into very uncomfortable moments on a track, physically, mentally, is not top of your list when you don't even want to be here, right? So I was just struggling in that respect. I then tried to race, and I'm meant to be the next big thing, and I can't even finish races. I flew all the way to Qatar for my first race of the year. I got halfway round and just stopped. So it wasn't until I got called into my coach's office, basically for a telling off, of like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? That then I kind of had that moment where I was just like, this means nothing to me, and I'm finding that really hard because this is meant to be my dream, and yet I don't want to be here. Then I went and saw our doctor at British Athletics, our head of medical, who diagnosed me and then put me through the referral system that we had available for funded athletes at that time. So it wasn't like actively going and seeking help, but that's because I was probably in quite a unique position where my performances kind of made that pretty obvious to everyone that there was a problem, right? Whereas most people won't have that public display to kind of force their hand.
And did you start to understand or unpick why it happened? Was it down to the pressure you were putting on yourself, or, the mental state you were getting yourself into? Did you understand it in order to help with the recovery?
Well, a lot of the work I did with a psychiatrist who was incredible. He essentially saved my life, right, by having these conversations with me and working with me and going on to medication and so on. But it was a lot of, I can look back now and say as a kid, I definitely struggled. Perfectionist traits, a real fear of failure, anxiety constantly. But I didn't really see it like that. And I don't think other people did because I was successful. So I would even as a kid be going into a race and I'd be throwing up like 3 times beforehand as like a 12-year-old going and just running around a track because I was so nervous about potentially losing. But because I'd then go and win the race and run really fast, people would, it's almost like success and poor mindset, poor mental fitness, mental health. They can't go together. So because Jack's performing well, he must be okay. Rather than like, well, yeah, Jack's performing well, but we've got some real issues before that. And the result just regardless. So I definitely struggled a lot. And it was just how I kind of looked at the world and my perspective. And I think then when you look at the Olympics, it was such a big trigger moment. You put a young person with a lack of emotional intelligence, a lack of experience, a lack of failure at that point, with very little support. And that's not a dig at anyone at all. I just didn't have that support, mainly because I refused to accept support as well, because I saw that as a weakness. I was very much, I am the man and I'm on my own and I will handle everything. And then you go and underperform. Then you have to deal with that. I had 80,000 people in a stadium, millions watching at home. I then became known as the guy that fell at the Olympics. I questioned, my whole identity was kind of destroyed in that moment because I was meant to be this next big thing. And the thing is, had I gone and won those Olympics or medaled or whatever, something positive, all that would have happened is we would kick the can down the road of how I was thinking in that moment and the really unhealthy behaviors and mindset that I had. And all it would have happened is I would have had this questioning of my identity and my self-worth at some point, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line, and we would have just gone through this anyway. So I'm almost a little bit grateful it happened early because I was able to start working on myself and start improving myself and still have to, right? This isn't I am by no means a finished article at all. I'm a human being and I have ups and downs. And that actually was my biggest learning for me, was that I was a human being and that it was okay to struggle. It was okay to feel the things that I felt. But because I was male, because I was a successful sports person, deemed to be successful as a whole, I thought I had to be this idea of what that is. So you're not allowed to feel any negative emotions or struggle in any way. And then obviously those things would happen because that's inevitable, because that's life. But then that would, for me, I couldn't handle that because I was like, no, I'm not meant to feel these things. Then I would. So there's lots of, there's hours and hours to talk about the complexities of mental health and my experience. But yeah, those are some of the kind of top line things I really struggled to deal with as a young person.
And I think for people listening to this and listening to you, they must be thinking, here's Jack, top of his game, Olympic athlete, and yet he was not happy. He was having significant mental health issues. So what a powerful message that actually what you see on the outside of your perceptions have nothing to do with actually how somebody is performing or feeling inside. And the only way to really find any sort of, or find a way to start to recover, I guess, is you need to have your moment where you think enough's enough and I've got to do something about this, which is what you explained happened to you.
Yeah, and hopefully that moment isn't crisis. That's where we all need to work towards, that we can build that awareness that we don't have to get to a point where we might potentially lose someone, or create that much damage that then we go, all right, now it's a crisis. But we talk about change in terms of it's so much easier to stay where you are, whether it's good or bad. Most of us lack the courage to make a change, or have the fear that the change is the unknown. I don't know what that will look like. It might be too big. It might be too scary. It also might be the best thing that's ever happened to you. But where we are now is predictable. And I think that was, other than me not believing mental health existed, it was easier just staying as I was at that moment. Whereas obviously when I got to crisis, I have no choice but to look in the mirror and go, well, it's either I'm not going to exist anymore or we're going to go and do something about this. And the problem is we see that a lot, and I would love if we could get to, and there's always going to be that, but as a society, if we can be so much more aware and educated about ourselves to be proactive, and when we start to understand our triggers, our charges, whatever that might be, and we can feel ourselves kind of starting to go on to that struggling part of the spectrum of mental health, we can do something about it rather than just destroy ourselves and everyone around us and everything and then go, oh, I should do something now. Because that is the sad thing that happens a lot.
Do you think, you talked earlier about the fact that you're a man and, you didn't believe in mental health and things, it's now 2025. But, those stigmas still exist, and, things like suicide, rates are on the increase, and other sorts of, things like substance abuse. So even though there's more awareness, obviously something's still stopping, especially men, from talking about and accepting that they may need to get some support. So do you think, how much do you think it has changed? How much are people still, unable to share things for fear of, judgment or appearing to be, not masculine, or all these other things which are stopping men, traditionally talking about their mental health? How much do you think that's changing now?
It's obviously improving all the time, but I have a thought around this, and that is, yes, awareness is greater because of the amount of campaigns, the people speaking out, social media, so on and so forth. But what I think we lack, and this is the harder bit, is actually an education around what mental health is and what it really looks like. So I think the majority of people now would, if you said mental health, does it exist in terms of poor mental health and what we are promoting the awareness of, I think the majority of people say, yeah, mental health exists now. But that's very different to when mental health is on your doorstep, whether that's your own doorstep or within your environment, your community. I think we still have a lack of understanding of what it actually looks like, feels like, is. So then when it does come onto your doorstep, we don't know what to do about it. Whereas we're very good at saying, oh yeah, that thing over there that isn't my problem, I believe it exists. But once it's your problem, we're still lacking that education in what to do about it and whether actually it is okay. So I think that is the next frontier, and it's a bigger frontier and much, much more difficult than awareness campaigns. And, I've worked in workplace wellbeing now for the last 4 years or so. And that's a lot of the bit is, well, how do we go beyond Mental Health Awareness Day and campaign to creating those environments and those cultures where people better understand what mental health is and are more accepting of the reality of it when it comes along. So that's where I think we are. I also think if we're talking from a male standpoint, and everything I say is literally just my opinion, right? So I think men are still struggling to figure out who they are meant to be and what they're meant to be, because I think we've had this very old school of this is what a man is, and now we've questioned that, rightly questioned that, and we're saying what a man could be or should be, but I think people just don't really know. When actually what we should be teaching is you are an individual and you are going to be you. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, whatever you want to be, who you want to be, where you want to go. That doesn't actually matter. Like, just be you. That's okay. Whereas we're trying to put people in boxes, and I think particularly with men, I think we're kind of like stuck in the middle of who we're meant to be. So therefore we get even more uncertainty around how we should behave. No excuses at all for any behaviours on that. But that's how I'm looking at it from a bigger perspective.
Yes, I think there are those external factors at work here, and I think it is confusing, and we probably do need to and I think it's in flux, and we're in the middle of that process at the moment. You referred just a minute ago then to the work that you then moved into in terms of mental health as an ambassador and working, for example, at BBC Studios.
Yeah, so I went public with my mental health diagnosis when I was 21, just because a lot of people were asking what's happening with Jack, and I was quite naive at the time to the stigma, and I just thought, well, I'm a very open, honest person, I'll just say I'm struggling with this. But that led to me doing a lot of mental health ambassador work, a lot of keynotes. I effectively funded my whole career by doing keynotes, which was a nice win-win because it allowed me to continue running and paying my bills, but also allowed me to help as many people as possible by sharing my story. Probably at the start, I probably shouldn't have been sharing my story because I don't think I was sharing it from a secure place. I think I was sharing it and working my problems out in public rather than telling people my story and how I might be able to help them, which is more obviously what I do now. And so I just ended up, because there were very few people talking about this publicly, I ended up kind of being one of the main spokespeople and kind of a bit of a face, particularly in sport, around mental health, especially because I was still competing as well, which there weren't any active athletes talking about these kind of things. And that just built a reputation. I retired early at 28 because I wasn't willing to destroy myself anymore for something that, for me, the risk and reward just didn't weigh up. So plan was to carry on coaching. So I was coaching Olympic athletes at the time. But yeah, I got an opportunity to be head of wellbeing at BBC because of all my ambassador advocacy work, because of my theories around well-being and performance, and how well-being is the foundation of high performance, that if you're thriving personally, guess what? You're more likely to thrive professionally, because we're a human being 24 hours a day, and you're an athlete or an employee for just a part of that. Yet we put so much focus on your smaller identity rather than the bigger picture. So I looked at well-being a bit different to what it was being looked at the time. At the time, it was kind of like, oh, let's put some free fruit out. And isn't it just nice to be nice to people? Yes, it is nice to be nice to people, but we do it for a reason. We do it for performance, in my opinion. So because of all these views I had, I was given the opportunity to work at the BBC. I started a week before lockdown in the UK, of COVID lockdown, and had a very big job to do very quickly, which was tough. Responsible for 30 offices globally and over 10,000 people, and how we not only proactively looked at how we support people in their well-being and create the best conditions for people to be themselves and perform to the best of their ability, but also had to be very reactive in how do we support people right now going through a global pandemic. Then after that, I went into the startup world, but workplace wellbeing. So providing platforms that had assessments, had content from amazing speakers and professionals around how to look after yourself, essentially, and how to thrive. So I did that for a couple of years, had first company I was with were acquired, and so we did really well. Second company's just raised their Series A funding. And yeah, I kind of just fell into it. But it's amazing really that what was an incredibly difficult time, and continues to be at times with my mental health, like everyone else, I manage myself, and I have good days and I have some bad days. But what's amazing is what was obviously a horrendous time back when I was 20 has ended up forging a little bit of a second career that has a lot of purpose and a lot of passion. So I'm really grateful for that, because I don't think I would have ever looked at that moment in that way at the time, right? Or shortly after. But now I can look back and say, what an amazing thing that difficult time, that adversity, that real struggle allowed me to find another part of myself and be able to contribute to other people a bit more.
Do you think it's more recognised now in the athletics world, in the world of sport, that, mental health is something which perhaps needs to be addressed more? I mean, I imagine the answer is yes, but have you seen that yourself? When you look back at yourself, all those years ago, and you look at athletes that are coming through now, do you think there's more support for them, more understanding?
I think there is, but that's because I think don't really have a choice, because I think it's becoming more and more public, and you're seeing so many more people speak out compared to when I spoke out, 12 years ago now, or 11 years ago. So there's been a lot of work that's gone along the way. I think we still have a long way to go. The problem with sport is you've got a lot of coaches and philosophies and methods that are kind of old school, of you just have to destroy yourself. It's all about sacrifice, destruction. It's all about all these negative kind of war military references, rather than understanding the bigger picture. And I think so we still have some very bad practice. We have some amazing practice, amazing coaches, but like anything, there's good pockets and there's bad pockets, and that's fine. I also think within Olympic sports, there's very little funding, so you are quite restricted in how you support people. And so sports like track and field, it's not a centralized sport. Everyone's all over the place. That's really hard to manage. So I don't envy the likes of British athletics that are having to deal with these issues and try and solve them, because not everyone's in the same place doing the same thing. So it's very hard to support that, and you don't have all the money in the world to go and do that. I do think we're going to have a huge problem within sport, and I think this is the same within the workplace, of we have newer generations coming into our workplaces, whether that's sports or whatever your job is, who are far more informed around their health and well-being. They're far more educated, and they have very different values and expectations around how they should be treated, what work looks like, and just what life looks like. And we're getting these people come through, and then typically we have coaches, managers who look at life a lot differently. And that's not to say it's right, wrong. Everyone's just different, and different experiences and different environments. But I think we're going to get a real clash of the new talent coming in who just want something completely different to what's currently available. And I think we're going to have a very messy middle time before we then settle to get some change. And there'll be great things from that change that need to be brought in. There'll be some things that are demanded or expected that aren't the right thing. But yeah, I do think we're going to have a very difficult time. I see it in workplaces already from the work I do, but I see it in sport as well, particularly in sports like in the UK, where we're so reliant upon volunteers. And typically those volunteers are retired people who haven't been in the sport for 20, 30 years because we financially cannot afford to go and coach. And now that they are, and you've got a load of kids who are just very different. If I leave the sport now for 20 years and come back and coach, it's going to take me a little while to understand the people I'm working with.
Just talking further then about well-being, in the workplace. That's a massive subject, but in summary, in your view, how do corporations, how do companies best manage well-being, manage the staff so that they have a fulfilling experience? And as you said, if they can bring their passions from outside work into work, then it's kind of win-win for everyone. But in my experience, anyway, I think it's rare to see that actually in practice. A lot of it's talked about, or as you said, maybe the surface level practices. But how it's difficult. How do you actually do that, in practice, certainly at scale?
So there was an amazing study done, and I use sports as references because it's the world that I come from and I understand very well. There was a study done on elite sports people to try and predict performance. What are the things that need to be in place for us to guarantee great performance? And this is all elite sports people, so it's not like, well, one's better than the other. Everyone's good, right? The three things. The first one was the people that had a meaning. It was a really high indicator of performance. So there was meaning towards their work or the people that they work with, the community they're a part of, which we hear so much around meaning, finding your why, finding your purpose, whatever that might be, right? Something that aligns with your core as to why you want to do something other than someone pays me or because I can, because I'm good at it. They're not particularly strong drivers in the long term. Other than meaning, you also had in there a sense of autonomy. So people being able to just be in control of their own lives and being trusted to go and do their job, right? Which I've seen so many times how that does not happen. You go and employ someone because you're like, wow, this person's great. And then you try and dictate to them how they do everything. It's like, yeah, but you brought them in because they were great. So why don't you trust them to begin with? Like, just to go and do it. So autonomy was a really big part of that. And then there was belonging, which can be similar to meaning, depending on how you view your meaning. But belonging, feeling like you belong to that community. Those are three things. There's nothing there about revenue or skills or anything like that. That's the thing, because well-being is just about people. This is why it's also really difficult and why it changes so much, because every person's different. Everyone, yeah, that's hard. And also in a large organisation like the likes of the BBC, we have so many people. But that's where a lot of the focus is then on our senior leadership team and on our managers or anyway, how do we create the best environments where people feel like the work is meaningful? They feel like they belong in our environment as well, that's a part of them. They belong here. But also we then give them the trust and control to go and do their job. One of the things that I talked about at BBC when I was there with the senior leadership team, because one of the normal answers you'll get is role modelling and permission-based work. So are our leaders role modelling the behaviours that we want to accept and want to see? By doing that, they give permission to those around them that they are managing, in charge of, whatever that might be. They give permission to behave and act a certain way. So if your CEO very publicly leaves early from work to go and pick up their children from school, I've probably created an environment where people go, oh, it's okay for me to be a parent and to go and see my children, right? Whatever. That very simple example. But one of the things we did with the senior leadership team was I said to them, when you're under stress or you come into difficulty, you will always revert to the thing that's most important, right? So whatever your main priority is. Now, for most businesses, that's revenue. So if we're coming into the last quarter, we're a bit short on revenue, whatever that might be, it's always going to be, we're going to do anything to make money. Doesn't matter what it is, we're going to do it to make money and hit our targets. So therefore, if people are collateral at that point, cool, we're quite happy with that, because our target isn't, can we keep people okay, happy, safe, secure? It's, we need to make money. So then I just said, like, can we get a people measure in here? And I said, I'm just going to start really simple on this, and it will sound stupid. And I was like, just bear with me. This will do something positive. It's just going to sound a bit silly. And I said, when we come into every senior executive meeting that we have, can we just ask one question first? Because if we put it first, it's also a priority, right? Or you put it last, it's a priority. If you put it somewhere in the middle, then people just whatever. But I said, can we just go round and you are asked, how are your people? And they were like, really? And I was like, trust me. And the thing is, because when people were asked, when senior leadership were asked, how are your people? We knew if they were lying about the answer or not. It's quite easy to figure out. When someone goes, yeah, they're all right. Well, you didn't ask then, did you? Because you don't know. Whereas all these leaders then had to go and ask the people they worked with, how are you? And also, how is everyone else in the team? And they then went and asked, how are you? We found out so much information that we wouldn't normally get, because we'd just send out an annual survey that just says, are you happy working here? 1 to 10, which tells us nothing, because most people, it's not anonymous, whatever it might be. But that question, it allowed us to just be like, do you know what? I am okay, but I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. Workload, which always comes up as number one. Workload's never the answer. It's always the things below that really give you the answer. But yeah, it allowed us to really open up, but not just find the things that we didn't like really hearing and think, oh, God, that's not good. It allowed us to find out some really cool stuff about what made our company great and what made our teams great, or our managers great, or the organization as a whole. So a little ramble for you there, but it's a really simple way of putting people first. And the thing is, like thriving personally to thrive professionally, if our people are doing well, they're probably going to go and do better work because they've got the capacity to focus. They feel like they're valued and they're cared about, so they want to work for us. Those kind of things.
And I guess no amount of kind of, massage Thursday or pizza Wednesday is really doing the job, is it? And so how about, if you look a little bit more at mental health support within organizations. So, organizations have a duty of care, and, people can go and do a mental health in the workplace, certificate, online. But how difficult is it to actually really support your staff? I mean, is it in the training of the management, or is it in the HR team? Where how do you successfully support your people from a mental health perspective, especially when it's not just it's not just stimuli from the workplace. Often it's what's happening at home, which you don't know about.
But my question would be like, why don't you have a relationship where you do know about that stuff? And I think a lot of the time when we talk about mental health, or we talk about the things that are outside the workplace, there's almost a fear to find out, because you think that when I ask about this, it then becomes my responsibility. I then become accountable for that individual. No, you don't. Like, you are responsible for being aware of what is happening. And then if you need to make any adjustments to support that person, cool. And if you can, not your job to fix it. That's on the individual, but it is your job to support them. So we talk about high challenge, high support are the environments that we want, right? So I want to be in a challenging environment because that allows me to grow. I feel like I'm I'm active. I'm doing something worthwhile at work. But if I just have really high challenge, no support, then I just get overwhelmed and I feel it's too difficult. But we want high support. That's no different with just generally looking after people. Like, cool, I'm going to ask you to do great things. There's going to be an expectation that we achieve great things here. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you are in a position that you can go and do that. That doesn't mean I'm going to go do your work for you. It just means I'm going to make sure that you're in the best place to do your work. And that's no different with mental health, in my opinion, and well-being. It's like, I will make all the allowances I can to make sure that you perform to the best of your ability. And we almost have like an unwritten contract between us that, like, I'm going to support you and then you're going to go and do your very best. Whether that is, right? Because that's all you're really asking of people. But I think we just get so scared of like, oh, if someone tells me they feel depressed, I then have to own it. You don't have to own it. You just have to be aware of how do you support it. So actually, we have these resources available. Is there anything I can do as an individual to support you within our workplace? Just simple questions like that. Doesn't mean it's like, oh God, this is now my problem. It's not. And I think that's where we need to move, especially with management. And I think, my experience working and consulting with multiple global companies now, big fear is management just don't feel they have the tools available to them to offer that support, or more likely they don't have an awareness of what's available to then offer it, and then they feel like they have to own it. So those are the things that come up for me. So a lot of this is just, I talk about horse to water with well-being, workplace well-being in terms of responsibility. Your job is to lead the horse to water. So whether that's communications, however, communication is always your best ally within a workplace, because most workplaces actually have loads of support, but just no one knows where to find it or where it is. So let's communicate where the water is. We're going to provide the water, all of that support that's available, whether it's employee assistance programs, whether it's whatever it might be. There's so many different things, right? But it's not my job to make that horse drink. That's not my job. And I have to accept that that's not my responsibility.
Yeah, a lot of it's signposting, isn't it? Knowing where to send people, not having to solve it.
Yeah, unless if you're a qualified psychiatrist, then yeah, you step up and do your job, right?
But if you're running the technical support team, you just need to know where to signpost to,
and then just listen and be just caring and just be a human being about it. Like, I can't fix this problem. Not that you fix things, but I'm not medically qualified, whatever that might be, to support you with this, but I can support you as a colleague, as a friend, whatever it might be. There you go. There's your responsibility. There's your line. And if you do that, then I promise you that's going to be worth so much.
Let me ask you one last thing, Jack. So people listening to this who feel that they, what you've been talking about resonates with them. They're probably not all aspiring Olympic athletes, but the things that you've talked about, especially early on in your career, suffering from depression and putting yourself under a lot of pressure actually to succeed. What's your advice to people who resonate with any part of your story? What should they do what's within their capability to do just to start them feeling better or finding a way forward?
It's always hard on anything because it's so individual, isn't it? For a question like, because everyone's different. The same way you say, like, some people will listen to my story and go, "Oh yeah, these bits relate, Jack," and I saw this topic came up, and others be like, "No, that bit completely went over my head, not bothered by that, but this bit, great." And that's the thing, it's so individual. But more than anything, I've got loads of mindset tips I talk about, but this isn't one of them. I'm just going to say, it takes a village to achieve anything. You never do anything on your own. I might stand on a start line, or used to stand on a start line, and people think that it's all me. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have contributed to getting me to where I am. And that's actually no different in terms of my mental health as well. There have been so many people that contribute and have facilitated certain environments for me to feel better, for me to feel supported and loved and cared for. You just got to start finding the right people. So build that team. And lots of those people will have different skills and strengths and be able to support you in different ways. And they might not be able to support you in some ways, and where you find someone else that can do that. But you never do anything alone. It takes a village. So go find a village to, help you on that journey.
Jack, thank you so much. Thank you for being very honest and open, and for some great, advice as well. Thanks.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you or someone you know is struggling with depression or thoughts of suicide, there are organisations you can call now. For example, in the UK, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123. And if you're in the US, you can call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you have a story to tell and you think your experience would help others, then please get in contact, either via the website, mid-lifemen.com, or email me at midlifemen01@gmail.com. If you'd enjoyed listening, then please do rate and review the podcast. And finally, there's now a book called Men Speak Up, Journeys Through Mental Health, which is based on stories from the podcast and is available to buy on Amazon and from most online bookstores.